On this edition of the program, both Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. are on their way to confirmation. We have a little media conversation with our friend Chris Cillizza. And is Trump's one big, beautiful bill already dead? It's all coming up.
The following is brought to you by Just Another Pilot.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program for February 5th, 2025. Your old pal, Justin Rappert, Young, joining you here in Austin, Texas. A lot going on, obviously. This is an extraordinarily busy government. We have a lot of movement on a lot of stuff. I don't even know if we're going to be able to get to all of it because it is happening in real time. I don't know what we covered last time. I don't know what we're covering this time. I'm going to do a real quick Substack plug up top because we do 4 episodes a week. If you are on Substack, they're necessary now. I'll put it this way. There was a time 4 years ago when Joe Biden was in his first year where I almost quit the show because I had to just talk about the incremental rumors about the Build Back Better bill. I was tearing my hair out. I just did not want to do it. I think I talked about it on the show that I was giving myself permission that if I didn't find news, I would just do something about political history. Just be prepared that I will talk about Spiro Agnew or something like that. We're not there anymore. Too much news. Too much news. We're not really even going to get into the trade war that wasn't, the North American trade war that wasn't. That was the main topic that we were talking about on Sunday. Mexico, Canada, both of them come to an agreement with the United States that there's going to be a halt on 25% across the board tariffs for at least a month. The question is exactly how much Donald Trump did take from them, whether or not these were just recommitments to things that the Canadian government and the Mexican government had already guaranteed. But one way or another, that is now not happening. China tariffs are going in 10%. That may or may not lead to us leaving the World Trade Organization, which would be a big idea. But we'll get to that down the road. We can't get to that here because we have more news. News that we have covered episode by episode for the past few weeks. The cabinet of Donald Trump's administration, the 47th presidential administration of the United States of America. Colorful, representative of Donald Trump's wide coalition. There are some that were easy. Elise Stefanik, easy. Marco Rubio, unanimous. And then there were some that were a little bit more controversial. Pete Hegseth barely squeaked by. But throughout all of it, there were 2 that always had the lowest odds. And I mean that literally. If you look at the betting markets like Polymarket. That is Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. And they both had very low odds because they're not Republicans. And ultimately, the way that you would kill a nomination in the Senate when Republicans have a 53 to 47 seat edge, the way that you stop these is by peeling off Republican votes and not Democratic votes. So the Democrats can stomp their feet, wave their hands, all they want, doesn't matter. It's about the Republicans. And so it makes sense that the 2 most liberal, up until months ago, lifelong Democrats would have the stiffest competition to get out of not only their committees, but also to get confirmed. And to be fair, either of them are confirmed finally, But they both today, as I speak to you on Tuesday, made it out of committee. And they made it out of committee because very specific voices confirmed that they were going to vote for them. We will start on the Tulsi side. Susan Collins, she's not afraid to be somebody that stands in the way of the Trump administration. She represents Maine. That is not exactly a super red bastion, although one time during a bit on Conan O'Brien, it was referred to as the deep south of the far north, which I will never forget whenever I think of Maine. Susan Collins does not have the same makeup as, let's say, Ted Cruz does here in Texas, right? She backed Tulsi Gabbard. That gets her out of committee on straight party lines. It appears as if there was some outreach from not only John Radcliffe of the CIA, he was the newly installed Trump CIA director, but also J.D. Vance, to smooth over any issues that came along with Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearing, which centered on the idea that Tulsi Gabbard, while saying that Edward Snowden was a criminal and she would not recommend a pardon, did not cross the line to saying that he was a traitor. Unless you were saying that Edward Snowden deserved to die and therefore was guilty of treason for which the punishment can be death, I don't quite know what the point of drawing the line in the sand on traitor is, but yet there it was. And uniting in her support remains one of the strangest coalitions that I have seen on the right of this country. Far-right Republicans like Tom Cotton. Downright never-Trumpers like Meghan McCain. Charlie Kirk, who, by the way, has fomented in Arizona the right wing of that party that has tormented the McCain family. Meghan McCain going on Charlie Kirk's show yesterday, Monday, to say that they would team up to primary anybody who voted against Tulsi Gabbard. Jack Posobiec of One America Voice. But Posobiec and Kirk you might see together. Cotton and McCain, maybe. All four of them on one team. Now that is strange. And yet, here we are. It looks as if Tulsi Gabbard will be confirmed. Those poly market odds now skyrocketing from the lowest I saw, 42, to where it is right now at 98. And with that, we move on over to RFK Jr. RFK Jr., I think, had a sloppier confirmation hearing than Tulsi Gabbard. You know, Tulsi Gabbard wound up becoming a thing because of the traitor back and forth, but ultimately she seemed pretty on top of it and very confident. RFK Jr., on the other hand, who, by the way, I saw with young voters is the second most popular person in politics. I think only Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez ranked higher. She was quite a bit higher, but RFK Jr., very popular with these kids. But look, Bobby's a Kennedy. Bobby is used to everybody gathering around him and just listening to him pontificate. And it's not to say that he wasn't prepared. I'm just saying he was Kennedy prepared, meaning that he just kind of assumes he should have this position in the way that most Kennedys assume that they should have most positions in the government. I don't really blame the man. It's his birthright. And yet, the Democrats, I want to say this, we're going to have Jen Briney on the show to kind of wrap up our hearing aids series, but spoiler alert for when we talk to her, I think the Democrats did a horrifyingly crappy job. If their goal was to try to spike some of these, then they did a terrible job. Now, maybe they didn't really want to, but they sure were screaming and yelling a lot for somebody that didn't really care about it. So I don't know. It didn't make a ton of sense to me the way that they handled things. And we'll get into this, the strategery of it with Jen. But still, they yelled about vaccines. And that became the last sticking point. Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, somebody who voted to impeach Trump, eventually says that, he's talked with Bobby enough and he feels comfortable pushing him out of committee. And so Trump's going to get his cabinet. I think there's one more possibility. There is a labor secretary who voted for the PRO Act. This is basically of the coalition that Donald Trump assembled to get elected. He was pretty straightforward with what I assume were promises he made to assemble that coalition. And I assume he made a promise to the head of the Teamsters that he would put somebody that was union friendly in the Labor Secretary position. And she faces, again, a confirmation issue because she is skeptical to Republicans. But she would be the only one left. And by far, she is the least headline grabby controversial. But Tulsi and RFK, when you looked at this slate, aside from the false start with Matt Gaetz, Pam Bondi confirmed today. This was a tougher slate of confirmations than Trump had in his first administration, and they've handled these pretty deftly. Now, again, I think the Democrats did a crap job putting up any kind of defense, but still, you play the game against the team that is across from you. We got our update, and then our old boy, Chris Cillizza. This is your update brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. That's where you get on the news train, baby. 4 cars every week. I guess the week is a route. This metaphor is already going off the rails. Huh? Of course, you have 2 free shows in your feed right now. You're listening to it. I'm telling you, though, if you've noted, boy, this government is going really fast and you just want to get a decent, level-headed sense of it, come on. Look, lock in right now. $99 from now until next January. That brings us right up to the doorstep of the midterms. We're going to be talking primaries around this time. I'd say January, it's February already. That's how fast things are going. They're going so fast. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. $12 for a month. $99 for the entire year. Come on. Over 150 episodes of PX3 for less than $100. What are we doing here? Come on. Less than $1 an episode? Come on. Let's get into some of the stories that we didn't have a chance to discuss yet. The Trump administration is making moves to place nearly all of the U.S. Agency for International Development and their Washington-based staff on leave, according to a USAID official and a person familiar with the situation. The move affects thousands of people and is the latest blow the administration is striking against the agency, which is America's primary vehicle for providing humanitarian aid. Tech mogul Elon Musk, a Trump ally running an initiative aimed at downsizing the government, has made USAID his target over the last several days. A person familiar with the situation said some 1,400 people will be notified Tuesday on top of about 600 who were placed on leave starting Sunday night. That amounts to the majority of the Washington-based staff, many of them civil and foreign service officers. The person said that the action was approved by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The person was granted anonymity because of sensitivity of personnel moves. So you have probably heard a lot about the Doge Committee, Elon Musk and his youth brigade, a bunch of young coders between the ages of 19 and 23 that are currently combing through the federal government looking for waste, fraud, and abuse. That is what they say. You might have heard other descriptions of it, up to and including that they are hijacking personal data and that they are illegally making decisions that should be congressionally decided. Indeed, it was Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries who said that they would be introducing new legislation to stop this, DOA though it might be, entitled Stop the Steal. No joke, folks. No joke. USAID is, as we just described it, the primary way that the United States doles out humanitarian aid. It is also something that has been bipartisanly ridiculed over the years for spending a lot of money outside of its purview and without much coordination between itself and the State Department. It appears as if USAID is going to be rolled back into the State Department. Before we get into any kind of conspiracy theories about it or some of the more far-flung expenditures for which it engaged in, and this is a deep rabbit hole if you care to go down it, we can go to the establishment man, Marco Rubio, who said earlier this week that the problem with USAID is that it had become entirely detached from the missions of the United States of America, and that it looked at itself as a charity that was not beholden to any one government. Indeed, it was a charity there to serve the world. There's a lot to say about whether or not it is Elon Musk that are making these decisions or it is him directing the appropriate authorities like the White House and the State Department to make these kinds of moves. But what isn't at a question is that Doge is moving. They are moving. They are moving very, very fast. The other big controversy with them was apparently getting access to the Treasury Department's spout for paying out money. Elon Musk comparing this to when they tried to do waste, fraud, and abuse management at PayPal back in his formative years, saying that the first people that you hear scream bloody murder about these kinds of things are the fraudsters. But in these cases, the people that are screaming bloody murder about it are obviously Donald Trump and Elon Musk's political enemies. What seems to be true is that Elon has found a groove. Democrats are very mad about it. And we are probably in somewhere between nobody has walked these paths, so we're going to have to consult the deep rule book on exactly what's allowed to happen, and the constitutional crisis as to the effectiveness of Doge. But that being said, I would caution Democrats on drawing a line in the sand on U.S. aid specifically for a couple reasons. Number one, most of the people that are, that elected Donald Trump, especially the white working class or just the working class, people without a college degree, they don't care about foreign aid or they don't like it. One of the two. Very rarely in, the Union Hall of Michigan is somebody saying, Bob, I really appreciate PEPFAR. No, they care about their wages. They care about their retirement. They care about their pensions, all that kind of stuff. Kitchen table issues. They want jobs. They want low prices. That's that. That's all that they really care about. They don't care about foreign aid. In fact, they assume that part of the reason why they are not where they want to be is because of foreign aid. So if Democrats need to win those voters back, then you're not going to do it talking about the poor children of a far-flung land. Where I would go if I were them is not to USAID. I would use USAID as an example of how vicious Doge is running through something. And then I would park myself out front of Social Security. I'd park myself out front of Medicare. And I would say, I will not allow Splinter and his Ninja Turtles to enter into these premises. Because what Elon Musk did to USAID, he wants to do to Medicare. He wants to do to Social Security. If you want to take another angle, he wants to do to your military. Now, will Elon eventually do all that stuff? Who knows? I didn't assume he would go and, rip through USAID. This is something that, I didn't have on my bingo card. And yet he's doing it. That's what I would do. From the White House to the Waffle House, the venerable Southern chain is adding a 50-cent surcharge per egg due to inflation and bird flu impacts. According to a company memo, the temporary surcharge began February 3rd due to an unprecedented egg price increase. The company hasn't specified when the surcharge will end. Some locations have posted notices about the surcharge on windows and menus. Egg prices are up 40% since January 2024, with the Agriculture Department forecasting another 20% increase this year. The ongoing bird flu outbreak started in 2022 is the main cause, as infected flocks must be culled entirely. Supply chain expert Patrick Penfield told Nexstar prices may exceed 2023's record of $4.82 per dozen, noting that natural immunity development in hens could take years. There has certainly been a price spike in eggs, as we pointed out. And if it's hitting the Waffle House, you know that it's hitting hard. I've seen commentary, not only in the news, but also in my own group chats with people who are less than fans of Donald John Trump, that, oh man, look, Trump has to own it. Trump has to own it. He's got to own it. He has to own the fact that these eggs are expensive, because look at what happened with Biden. Biden lost that race. He got tarred and feathered because the price of living was going up, and it was no more obvious than at the grocery store. And that's true. Donald Trump will have to own it. As I've said on this podcast numerous times, the economy is either a persistent plus or a persistent negative on any president's electoral or political clout. Donald Trump is obviously a lame duck, so he's not going to be facing an election that we know of. But still, the Republicans' reputation, if they want to minimize their losses, or dare I say, hold or gain in the House, then they're going to have to foster actively a belief in the American electorate that the economy is good. And rising egg prices, a staple of the American home, is not a great way to do it. But I would offer one caveat to the idea that Trump has to own it. And I will go back to the Biden example. The fact that prices were going up were obviously not good for Joe Biden. But what made it worse was the way that he talked about it. It was Putin's price hike, and then it was shrinkflation. There always had to be another boogeyman instead of saying, here's what we see, here's what we know, here's what we can do, we will fight through this together. And when the explanation changes several times, that's a problem. So, what does that mean for Trump? Well, I think for Trump, amongst all the things that he's doing, and the guy's on camera a lot, answering questions from people a lot. he will get questions about bird flu, and I think he's going to want to have good answers for him. Now, they'll probably be that Joe Biden did a terrible job at managing bird flu, which, I am not a bird scientist, so I don't know the answer to that question. But while rising prices are never good for a presidency, you can at least mitigate it from being terrible, because the Biden conversation and narrative building around inflation, I do think had a material impact in the nation losing faith in him as an honest broker for that. And finally, I said I almost quit the show because I had to talk about Build Back Better. So I'll do a little bit of Senate gossip on what's going to happen with the president's agenda. This via Axios. Senate GOP leaders are planning to pitch Donald Trump on Friday night at Mar-a-Lago to stop waiting on the one big, beautiful bill from the House and pivot to a two-part plan immediately. The House is stalled on a major budget package, but there is urgency to act now, says Senate Majority Whip John Barrasso. He expects to bring the following message. It's now, Mr. President. It's time to move. We have this. The Senate's first reconciliation package would address border security, energy, and defense. Reconciliation allows the Senate to pass budget-related legislations with a majority vote. Senate Budget Chair Lindsey Graham says he has legislation that is ready to go. Barrasso recently talked to Border Czar Tom Homan at the White House. Homan told Barrasso he needs resources to continue what has been a startling crackdown to illegal immigration. Barrasso noted that extending Trump's tax cuts is important but complicated, and the deadline is not until December 31st. Spinning the issue off on its own has been the Senate's preferred plan from the get-go, even as House Speaker Mike Johnson has pushed for the all-in-one approach. So here's the top line of this. And I know that I could get way, way, way deep into the weeds on it. The House can't pass two bills, because if you have two bills, then you have half the amount of leverage to get everybody you need to on the same page for one bill. The House is the one with the least amount of wiggle room, because they have right now a 2-seat majority, which means two people can object to a gigantic, sprawling bill where I have been told from inside the Republican House majority, they can't agree on math. Okay? They can't agree on math. Specifically, I'll spell this out for you, or I'll add it up for you. There are some in the House majority that believe that extending the Trump tax cuts will cost money. There are others that believe that extending the Trump tax cuts will not cost money, because we are already operating, and have been since they were passed, at the same levels. And that's before we even get into whether or not they trust the Congressional Budget Office, because eventually there will be legislation written up and it'll be sent to the CBO, and then the CBO will say, well, it's going to cost X amount of money. But they were off by, I think, trillions with the Trump tax cuts, according to some. So the view from the House is that no matter what, this is going to be a very intricate hostage game to get anything through. And if you start leaving things out, then you will not be able to get all the House Republicans on the same page. Now, the Senate is in a different situation. I think right now they actually have a larger majority than the House, which is insane. But they would like to move things forward. and it's easier for them to do two bills. They have the right amount of votes on either side. They're able to say, okay, well, we'll do the immigration stuff here, and then we'll do the tax stuff over here. And the tax people can not vote for the immigration bill, and the immigration people cannot vote for the tax bill. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Life in the Senate. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Life in the Senate is such a breezy. So, of course, the Senate wants to move things forward. This is part of the reason why I said that if you are Mike Johnson's worst enemy and you hate him, the worst thing that you could do for him was give him the worst job in Washington, to be the Speaker of the House with your party in the trifecta, and you have 2 votes to squeeze things by. And now the Senate's going to, put pressure on him. So we'll see. That's your update. TakePoliticsSeriously.com is where you need to go if you want to support this show. And don't even do it. Look, yes, you support me. Get these episodes. Do you see what's happening? Get the episodes. They're available right now. 2 extra episodes, a Thursday episode and a Monday episode. And not to mention this, the Monday episode, we go through all the Sunday shows so you don't have to. And whether or not you think that they're dumb, and they are dumb, there is no doubt that those are the shows where DC talks to itself. The media and the power structures talk to themselves. If you want to know what they want you to believe, you got to get that bonus Monday show. All right. Speaking of television, let's talk to our friend, Chris Cillizza. Welcome back to the show, our friend Chris Cillizza of the So What Substack imprint, and really, I would say, you've said Chris Crucial. That's one of your taglines.
Oh yeah,
there. Chris Conduit, as you are now somebody that has facilitated not only yourself from CNN, but Jim Acosta leaves last week, a CNN to Substack refugee, and Chuck Todd, who you do a podcast with each Monday. He's officially out of NBC.
Yep.
And
it's all happening, Justin.
The independent environs. You mentioned on social media that you had more conversations from mainstream talent to the independent world in the last 2 weeks than you had in the previous 2 years. What has that been like?
It's so interesting, right? Because when I got laid off from CNN and I started a Substack, people were like, "Oh, that's nice. Yeah, good for you. I'm sure it'll be great." But it was kind of like, "Oh, God, that poor bastard."
Yeah, it was the way that starting something independent was understood for the previous 30 years in media.
Totally.
Right.
It's like when somebody tells you "Yeah, I'm starting a business," and it's like a terrible idea, and you're like, "Man, good for you. Do your thing." Yeah.
It seems like you're really having fun.
You don't lie, but you're not supportive. So there was some of that. And, the truth is even though Substack was already a thing 2 years ago, obviously, or in the independent world was already a thing.
Yeah.
I think legacy or mainstream media, whatever the hell you want to call it, big media, I think that there was still this sense that working in those places
it's a
gave you something that you could never replicate. Yeah. And I don't know. I said to someone the other day, who will go unnamed, but I said to someone the other day, it was last Friday, I was talking to him, and I said, look, to be candid, the biggest thing you would have to deal with is your own ego to not be able to say, "I'm fill in the blanks." Huh?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm just plain old Chris Cillizza. I'm not CNN's Chris Cillizza. And you'd probably get invited to less parties and, the White House Correspondents' Dinner and the Alfalfa Club and the Gridiron. I don't give a shit about any of that anyway, but you're not as much in that little insular, and this is very much a DC thing, to be clear. Yes. You're not in that world, but beyond that, it used to be like, oh, I don't know if I can make a living. Well, now I think there are enough examples of people who can make a living. Then it was, I don't know if I'll be able to have any influence. Well, I would suggest that like there's content is content. I always say like a link is a link at this point. Like if it's from the New York Times, I'll probably open it. If it's from a Substacker I like, I'll probably open it. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think that I think people are starting to wake up to that reality. And they realize, of course, that like even if you're on a big island in mainstream media, the island is going to keep shrinking. And at some point, you're going to be in the water. Like, you know,
I mean,
and like,
I think, you know, I remember when part of the calculus that made me jump to Substack was, and I've told this story before, but at the conventions, I looked around and I was like, okay, I was in C-SPAN's booth and I was like, I'm looking all around, I'm looking at CNN and Fox and everybody. And it's like, how many people are going to be here? How many booths? Like right now, CNN has like 7 booths. Are they at 7 in the next 4 years?
No way.
I don't think so. I think they might be at 3. I was
going to say, they won't be at 0. They won't be at 0, but they're not going to be at 7.
But it's not going to be at 7. No. And I'm like, okay, well, part of the thing that makes Substack special is that it's a brand that's known for this, so you don't get quite the reputational hit, right? Like now, you know, it's like moving to go from mainstream media, and you'd be a better judge of this on this metaphor, but like right now, it's not moving from New York City to like the farm. It's like moving from New York City to Brooklyn. Like it's
totally
like now it's adjacent. It's not exactly. It's adjacent. It's around there. It's hip. Right, so it's like, I think you could be on the ground floor of something.
It's so funny that you do the real estate metaphor because I do too, which is like, I think, and you were actually doing this before me. I think people like us, whether by choice or by necessity, were building houses over the last couple years in a part of town no one wanted to live in, or a few people were even aware of. But now
small town vibes, yeah.
But now it's the hippest place to live, like that. You know what I mean? Home values are soaring, and that is kind of how I've started to think about it. Like I still remember people. I don't know if I told you this, but I still remember people when I get laid off from CNN. It's obviously a high profile thing. People are like, you know, it's in like playbooks. So everybody in DC knows it, and all these people are like, man, this is going to be the best thing that's ever happened to you. And I was literally like, fuck off. Like that, you know, like I understand you got to say something. Like I get it. It's like a funeral. You can't just stand there. You got to say something. But like that is not comforting in any way, shape, or form to me unless you like have a job you can give me.
Exactly.
Right? Which none of them
Are you going to offer me a gig?
With healthcare. And so... But like I was thinking about this last week. I was talking to somebody on one of these calls about like, hey, should I jump into the independent media world? And they were like, man, I got to be honest, like you sound happy. And I was like, I am happy. Like it's not every single day. There's some days, it's a job. There are some days that are a grind, but like I am happy. Like, and I am thankful now that I got 2 years to build houses in the place that people weren't building houses, or at least not as many people were building houses, because I think you're going to see a lot of houses start to try to be built in the next year or two in this independent creator space. And I would just...
And part of it is that this is cool and it is hip. And if you have a certain mindset, you can both make a living and be outside of the pressure system. But also it's because the mainstream media doesn't have the same kind of money that it used to have.
No.
And, you know, we saw one of those lawsuits 2 weeks ago where there were some startling conversations about where CNN's bottom line is. And I can't imagine that it's going to get rosier from here. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of trend lines that assume that things are going to get more, financially lucrative over there. And so it's like part of it is both sides. And I don't think it happens without both sides, that you have a flagging money problem in mainstream media that, you know, they're used to living at a certain level, and now budget's going to have to be cut. A lot of those rosters are going to look a lot differently in 2 years than they do right now. And meanwhile, you know, if people really want to put in the work, which that's the one big difference is
that's
that
the key.
You can't really coast here. Like
Nope.
like here
It's
you
on
do
you.
gotta sing
It's
for
on
your
you.
supper every day.
Yep. To me, like, so I tried to do, and I didn't do this right away, but I tried to think like, okay, like what's my market niche to the extent there is one, right? And it's like, it's not politics because lots of people can talk about politics. It's not my background because lots of people worked in those backgrounds. For me, and I think you and I agree on this. I don't know that we've ever talked about it, but for me, it is consistent ability to provide lots of content. And I think that's whether it's video, audio, written, some combo of all of them. That to me, when people ask me like, okay, I want to start this, I say, look, you must commit to, you are in their inbox very consistently. You are not taking 3 weeks off. You are, because that to me is the way that you build. And it's slower than you want. You don't go to, 1.5 million subscribers, but I think that's the way to long-term success is you just say to people, I'm going to be doing this. You're not going to like everything. You're not going to agree with everything, but I'm going to consistently be doing this. I'm going to be in your inbox. I'm going to be there over and over and over again when you want me to be. And I think that's how it builds.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that for you, that was the obvious model. And I think that your ability to create inside the mainstream structure, I think really helped you when you went independent because you were not somebody that was like, oh, I report when I have a story or I'm
writing every 2 weeks.
Or to be totally honest, coming from the TV side, I'm just kind of used to being a talking head on television. I can do I can, that's just a different skill set. And it's not to say that it's not hard, but it's not there for the internet. Like
no.
The fact that you can fit a succinct point in a minute and a half is not something that translates in the same way that somebody who can blog, somebody who can podcast can.
Yep.
So I'm curious because I do think that like while we're going to see a lot of people come into this world, it's not going to be for everybody. Like it is humbling and it is hard work to do. And so if you're coming from a situation where you're used to people saying, wow, you're great, boy, like one day you're just going to look at a post you put up with not as many comments as you thought it was going to get, and 3 of them are the nastiest thing you've ever read in your entire life, and that's going to be rough, dude. That's going to be hard.
I think the way that was really helpful to me to think about, and it's so interesting because it came from someone outside of journalism. This is a guy I know through my kid's school. He's a lawyer. A savvy media consumer, but a lawyer. And he said to me, look, this is very early on. This is 2 years ago. He said, look, you spent your entire career being a buyer. People came to you with information. People, viewers or readers came to you. Other job offers came to you. Okay. Now you're a seller. You got to go to people and say, here's this thing. Do you like this thing? Okay, you don't. What about this thing? Do you like this thing? And he's like, that's a very hard transition to make. And I think about that all the time because I see people coming over to Substack and they've got 180,000 subscribers, like, which is amazing. But for me, it's like, can you keep them? Can you, because a lot of, as anyone who does this knows, a lot of the people who jump in early are free subscribers, which I understand. I'm the same way. I kind of want to taste what they got before I make a reservation. I want to know what's going on here.
Yeah.
The question is like, can you keep those people? Because just the name doesn't, it gets you something. It got me 10,000 people probably would be my guess. 10,000 total subscribers. But if you're just kind of trying to dine out on the name, it won't.
I was going to say, because also it's like, 10,000 is great. You can make a living on 10,000. That is a very, very good number for somebody starting out. But I can imagine for somebody that spent, time at the Washington Post and CNN, when you seduce yourself into thinking, okay, well, what's the Post circ? what's the CNN ratings? I add those together. That's my audience. And it's like, it is not. It's probably so around 10,000 people.
These conversations I've been having with people, one of the first things I do say to them is, look, you think that people come to fill in the blank website or station for you. And there are some. But it's a lot less than you think. The truth is they come for CNN.com. And no, Chris Cillizza's on there. I'll read that.
I'll click there. That is a secondary decision.
But it is not, it is a very different thing. I do think there is, and I try to cure people of this, I do think there is this notion among kind of people who work in legacy media, like, well, look, I go over there, I get 10,000 paid subscribers. That's $500,000 a year. That's amazing money. And it's like, well, yes, it is amazing money. But like the climb to 10,000 paid subscribers is not easy. So I think that that's the only thing that worries me a little bit is you and I have talked about this, which is like, number one, it is hard ass work. You have to grind and grind and grind. You cannot just kind of hang out unless the thing you produce once every 2 weeks is so incredible.
Yeah.
You have to grind, number one. And number two, I worry that some people, and I'm getting this in some of the conversations I'm having, I worry that some people think it's just kind of like $500,000. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like everyone is just making all of this money. Like, oh, it's so easy. It's like, it's like, man, that has not been my experience. I do think, as I said at the start, I do think it is now viable financially in a way that I was worried it would not be 2 years ago for me, to be totally candid. But the idea that you're going to, you know, in The Simpsons, when Homer's like, this isn't a get rich quick scheme. We're just going to get rich and quick. Yeah. I think of that all the time. It's like, well, of course, everybody always says like, oh, no, I know I'll have to do a lot of work. But in their mind, they're like, well, it's such easy money. They're like doing the math. And it's like, I mean, it's not that. Like, it's not just a pot of gold that you just kind of walk over there, take a big scooper out and put into your bank account.
I worry about talent that comes from fields that is not used to like hardcore daily like output. Like if you have a staff, if you have like people around you that are helping you put stuff together and you are delivering it, man, it is a different world. Not everybody's built. I mean, a lot of people came from different things and they got different perspectives and, but it is a grind. And I'm curious because I do think that there's going to be a lot of really good stuff. There already has been. I mean, and that's part of what's amazing. You know, we ran into each other at that happy hour in DC that Substack put on. Yeah. And that was like the thing that I looked around the room and I'm like, damn, if somebody hired this room, that's a publication. Yep.
Like, I saw that. I think that's so smart of you. You're right.
Like you have, I mean, that's a diversity of opinions. That would be exciting. You'd be excited to hear them talk to each other. Like that would be a big thing. And it shows you where independent media is right now, but it's hard to do. I want to pivot real quick. Sure. Because something else that you've talked about, and this gets into the selling element of you bringing attention, is you have now twice on your Substack apologized for things.
I have.
You have apologized for the way that you handled the Biden mental issue and the origin of COVID. I wanted to get your opinion as to what brought you to that, because both of those have been people have been very fascinated, especially on social media. I've seen a lot of people quote tweeting. Some wanted to take a few more whacks at you. Some were happy to see it, but it was got the people going, as they say.
I mean, my basic view is like the thing that I've sort of made my North Star is like, try to be as authentic as possible, whether that's talking about your personal life and like, early on in the Substack, I talked about getting laid off and how much it sucked and, or like looking back. I mean, I've written a lot of stuff over a lot of years. And I think one of the ways that you build accountability and authenticity with any audience is to say like, and I say this all the time, like, I don't have a monopoly on the right idea. Like, I'm going to tell you what I think, and I'm going to try to make clear why I think that, right? I'm not just going to like say like USAID is bad or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to say like, and these are, here's the data points. Here's why I think it's good. Here's why I think it's bad, whatever. But inevitably you get stuff wrong. And I think one of the reasons, I was talking to Chuck Todd about this today. If you look at the trust in mass media, I think Gallup had it at 31%.
Not great, Bob.
Yeah, exactly. We're right up there with like used car dealers and politicians. So like, to me, one of the reasons, not the only reason, but we are to blame at some level. I don't think journalism is exclusively to blame, but we are to blame, I think, because we spent so long being gatekeepers and voice of God that we never admitted we screwed stuff up, because we thought, well, if we admit we screwed stuff up, then how will anyone trust us? And it's like, well, I actually think people trust you more if you're willing to say, look, here's with Biden, for example. Well, actually, let me do COVID because that's more recent.
Let's do COVID.
Here's my thought on COVID, right? I defaulted to assuming that Anthony Fauci, who had been the head of, the infectious disease for 40 years and a million presidents, was a more likely correct source on the origins of COVID-19 than businessman turned president Donald Trump. Okay. Yes. Now I actually stand by that, because I think most of the time when we're talking about infectious disease, I'd rather, like, if I have something on my arm that no one can figure out what it is, I'd rather, and my choices are Donald Trump or Anthony Fauci.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to Anthony Fauci.
If you are in a world for which, not everybody is focusing on everything or doing a deep dive on stuff at any given time, you could be understood to say the expert in one field is, especially with somebody for whom love or hate Donald Trump, the man is a take artist.
Yes.
Let us not remember that on the pathway to becoming a two-term president, we're many months talking about the love life of the Twilight cast. Like that is a part of his part of his experience. So he likes to shoot from the hip.
He has an opinion about everything. So
yeah.
The mistake I made was assuming that what Fauci was saying, which was it's very, very, very likely this originated in a wet market, it jumped from animal to human, that was capital T truth, as opposed to the best analysis someone like Anthony Fauci could do under the circumstances. Now, as you point out, in terms of like the reaction on social media, are there people who believe that Anthony Fauci engineered COVID-19 because he had a financial stake? Yes. Will those people ever be happy with any apology or admission of wrong judgment? Absolutely not. But like, I'm not doing it for them. If I did it for the people who are going to dunk on me, I'd never do anything. So my mistake was assuming that Fauci was 100% right and there was no way that the people, and Trump was one of many people who said could be a lab leak, were wrong. And I think that I'm a work in progress. I'm trying to figure things out as I go. I'm trying to understand that I will make mistakes and just try not to make the same mistake twice. And I think one of the ways to do that is to be open about the mistakes you do make. The people who, it's just so funny to me, the reaction when you say like, I screwed this up and here's why. People are like, it's either like, oh, this is part of the cover up, or, oh, you just woke up. And I'm like, man, I'm just trying to be like, speak from an authentic place. That's
number one. Social media falls into the realm of message boards for me. And I will say that message boards are not healthy for you. Like, they are not, it is like drinking. It's like it's a thing you can do if you have the spare time to do it, but nobody should go there to feel better.
No,
I do think that it was instructive though, that it got such a wide breadth of reactions, because I think you put yourself at a very important and interesting inflection point in media, I think in culture, that is reconciling with Donald Trump being president again.
Yes.
And the fact that he won the popular vote. And we saw as loud a noise as we did in the past at the end of this election in the fall, with Liz Cheney firing squad and the Puerto Rico joke and stuff like that. Those were covered wall to wall on television the way that they used to, and it mattered not at all, right? And so there is this reckoning of like, okay, well, what matters? What do we say matter? And I thought that you put yourself at the intersection of it. But I want to go on. This is the hypothetical I've had in my head since I saw you write about that.
Sure.
If I could put you back, you have all the memories that you have now, up to and including that CNN fired you. So you know that you're not really worried about the job. But you are back in time when you were on set and you were asked about either COVID or Biden, and now you want to put forth that perspective. How would it be received in the moment? And do you think that it would have affected, I mean, obviously we know that they eventually let you go, but do you think that it would have affected your job if you had offered that point of view?
It's a great question. I've sort of, let me say two things. One, there was never, at least when Jeff Zucker was there, and he's who hired me, and he's who was the boss at CNN for the vast majority of the time I was there. He's not the guy who got rid of me, but he was the boss.
Yeah.
I think I sort of, if you listened in on the morning call that CNN did every morning, and Jeff led it from an editorial perspective, you had a sense of what he thought, but I never felt like I can't say that. Honestly, I will tell you, I was more influenced by, and this is my second point, I was more influenced by what we just talked about, which is social media. It's weird. It's weird to me to think of, because the membership of Twitter or X or whatever has changed so drastically, even in like a year and a half, it's now if you want to go viral on X now, criticize Democrats. If you wanted to go viral on X before, it was criticize Republicans. Like it's so funny. But I think I was cowed in both situations, and not sort of consciously cowed. Like I wasn't like, oh, this will be bad if I say this, but I do think it was like social media. There was sort of this liberal thought police who were kind of like, if you question anything about Joe Biden, you're enabling a dictator. If you question anything about Joe Biden, you're an ageist. Now, I will say the vast majority of the Joe Biden age conversation happened after I was already gone from CNN, and I feel pretty good about what I wrote on Substack, by the way, which cost me a decent sized chunk of followers. When I would be like, he looks old. When you are in the cycle, boy, do you get those those are when the emails get the angriest. Yeah, man. Like it did cost me. So the COVID thing was more like I was at CNN the whole time, and so it's a little bit easier for me to do. And I think that I was a little bit caught up with it. I mean, no one noticed this. This was like 2 years. This was before I got laid off from CNN. But you know what? Like, I was thinking about this last week with the RFK Jr. hearing. My understanding was that if we got a vaccine, the vaccine would prevent me from getting COVID.
But because that was explicitly stated.
And that is not what the vaccine does.
Turns out,
I don't know if that was what they thought it might do, but it's clearly not what it does, right? It makes you a little less likely maybe to get it, and definitely less likely to get really, really sick.
Yes, that is the one thing that is like.
But I was compromised. If you ask me in the teeth of that thing, like, what is the vaccine going to do? I thought it was like polio. Like, if you get this, you're not going to get polio. Not if you get it, the polio won't be as bad. So I think I am to blame. Like, I kind of blame myself more than... It's so fashionable. It's so funny. It's so fashionable to be like, and then the media, the big media, wouldn't let me say what I really wanted. That was not my experience. I self-edited based on social media shaming more than I think, and when I look back, it's like, I cared a lot about that. This goes back to the whole, like, Do you want to be introduced at a cocktail party as CNN's Chris Cillizza? How important is that to you? Do you care when you run into someone like, hey man, what have you been doing since CNN? I don't see you on TV. Is that like devastating to your, like personal,
to your character? Yeah.
And I will say, for me, and of course, you only realize these things in retrospect, but it was really important to me. I loved being invited to all those parties. I loved having people stop me on the street. They'd be like, hey man, even if they yelled at me, they knew who I was. And I think there's a lot of people hanging on in legacy media so that they can hand out their business card.
But you say, I want to go back
Post.
to
go ahead.
Yeah, I want to go back to what you mentioned, that the real enforcement arm of this was not a boss, was not somebody that would say, hey, what the hell was that take? Like, that's really out of left field. Like, you had leeway to say what you would want.
No one ever, to be clear, no one ever in CNN or the Post ever said that to me.
Yeah.
One time.
So now, I would say, and that I think is a common misconception with people who have not been in media organizations, like it is not a caricature that you might see in movies or TV where someone's like, we got to stop the truth from getting out. Stop speaking truth to power or you're fired.
We're so disorganized. There's no way in hell anybody does that.
But I do think that you would probably have a more credible argument to say that it is a culture that was largely probably shaped by reaction on social media, to say, like, all of a sudden, Chris Cillizza goes from guy who is genial, pluckish, gets, whatever, a reaction online, to all of a sudden, Chris Cillizza, bad boy, I'm going to say what they don't want me to say kind of guy. That might have had, by, whatever reaction from social media, people are, if the main CNN account is getting like, fire Chris Cillizza. That might have affected things after a while.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look who they got rid of. Stelter. I mean, I know they brought Stelter back, but people who were, I did worry about that. There is no question. I worried about the like how I was perceived on social media, feeding into the perceptions of the people who made hiring and firing decisions. And the truth of the matter is, like, for whatever they said, they absolutely looked at that stuff. On a daily basis. Like, say what you will about Twitter, and I don't know if it's the case anymore because I haven't worked in a big
journalism
media in
is
2
captured.
years.
It is, but it has and will always be a captured thing where I don't know what it is about a journalist or media person's brain, but it hardwire taps in to the part of your brain that needs to be quick and fast. And so everybody is on there more than they are their jobs. That was the funniest thing. One of the first press pens I went into when I started covering campaigns on the road, it was a Trump press pen. And I just was in the back and I see everyone's laptop. And
Twitter.
Everyone's laptop is Twitter. Everybody. They're not posting to their job. Not what paid them the money, not what sent them there, not what they're going to have to file for. No, they are all trying to beat each other on Trump. Little Marco will never grow big. Like, that was it.
Jeff Zucker told me he's whatever you think of him. I love him, but people have very divided opinions on him. But what he is extremely smart about content and the media environment. And he said to me one time, he was like, Twitter is the only thing you do every single day that pays you $0.
Zero.
And that could get you fired.
Yep.
And I was like, shit. And I still kept doing it. But he's right. He's exactly right. And so I do think there was an element, like, look, I'm an only child of a not super happy a product of a super not happy marriage. I'm a pleaser. Yeah. I want people to like me. And so, like, when people are like, go fuck yourself, I fucking hate you, blah, 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 blah. Like, everybody says, like, it doesn't matter, who cares? It's like, well, like, the cumulative effect of that does have some influence.
You want to know what, though, Chris? That is the other thing that, to go back to our original point, for anybody who's coming out of the machine and wants to, create their own little shingle here in the internet media sphere, that's the other big thing, is that it's like, if you think that mean tweets hurt when you're getting 1,000 replies, wait for the mean tweet that comes when you get 10.
Totally.
Because that hits way harder. Like you do absorb support a little bit. Now, obviously people's brains can tune it out, but you do absorb it a little bit.
Of course. And I've gotten to a place, I don't know if this is just age or my experience or whatever, but like I'll write something and, there's a thing in Substack that when you cancel your subscription, if you cancel a paid subscription, you can write a little note on why.
Can write, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And not everybody does it, but people do it and they'll be like, I canceled because how could you say this? And you know what?
Yeah.
Like, back in the day, I would have been like, oh my God. And now I'm kind of like, that's okay. Like,
yeah, you're allowed.
It's not for everyone. Like, I get it. Like, somebody said recently, like, I wrote a thing about how I'm not going to make a mountain out of everything Donald Trump does, that there are molehills too, and that if we get outraged about every little thing, the outrage means less. And somebody sent me a note and it was like, I'm canceling. I read that piece. I can't believe you're enabling Trump. And I was like, well, if you read the piece, I don't think you would conclude I was enabling Trump, but whatever. Like, but that's okay. Cause like,
because by the way, you're just looking for a different product. This is because I get that all the time. I get the like,
you're looking for something I'm not selling. That's exactly
and it's like,
right.
Look, and by the way, there's plenty. There's plenty. If you want the like, now let's focus on Elon Musk's group of 19-year-olds that he's sending out like Ninja Turtles through USAID, then yes, somebody is going to give you 20,000 words on why
and they're
going to
be super pissed. They're going to be super pissed.
If that's what you want, you have it. It is out there for you.
It's just not what we're selling.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's what I always say to people. It's like, people are like, man, you just got to go viral for something. And I'm like, I actually don't want that to happen, because if I did, it would likely be like, well, for example, when I wrote about Biden's age issues,
yes,
it got a lot of attention oftentimes on Twitter because the right liked the idea that Joe Biden was too old. And I would get a surge in signups or whatever. And then all these people would cancel because they'd be like, I never knew that you were a Trump hater. And I'm like, okay, I'm not a Trump hater, but I'm also like, just because I wrote something critical of Joe Biden doesn't mean everything that I write is going to fit into. So what you are trying to buy is not what I ever said I was selling. You know what I mean? And it's like that is hard sometimes. It's like, I'm not trying to be anything, but people come in through a single post, or they see something, they're like, this is my kind of guy. When in fact, you have never said you're that kind of guy. Like, I always say, like, I try to call it how I see it. That sometimes will appeal if you hate Trump. It sometimes will appeal if you love Trump, but I'm not going to always be that guy. And I always say to people, and I do sometimes reply and I'll say, look, because they'll be like, I canceled my subscription on principle. And I'm like, that is absolutely fine. Like, if your bar for paying to subscribe to me is you have to agree with everything I say, you absolutely should cancel, because that is not in any way what I am thinking about. I don't start a post like, the subscribers are going to love this one. I just write. And so it's like, it's fine for you to cancel, because if it's not today, in a week or a month or even a year, you're going to find a post where you're like, well, that's not what I want. And that's not what I'm in the business of selling you.
Yeah. And to be totally honest, it's like that kind of churn is just,
it happens.
It's going to happen. And also credit to Substack, there is a more natural flow. Things can actually be found a little bit easier in that ecosystem. And so things wind up getting surfaced for people that wouldn't otherwise get it. Or like you said, there's one take that you have that's like, oh, that's interesting. And then they're like, oh, I don't like your other takes. It's like, that's fine. There's plenty of places where you can get whatever you want.
I always think, like, if every day the house is on fire, and then every morning you wake up and the house is still standing, it feels like this goes to like, how do you approach covering Donald Trump? It's like, if everything is a mountain and there are no molehills, then the mountains are meaningless. And that's what I don't totally understand. Like, I get that there are people servicing that community, and I'm fine with it. I'm just amazed that community is as lucrative as it is, because otherwise Donald Trump would be in a gulag somewhere at this point. Like, I don't get it, but it's not how I view the world. Like,
part of the media moment that I think we're in right now is I think, detangling of media from activism. And I think that it's a controversial subject to talk about in mainstream media, because no journalist thinks of themselves as an activist in general. But there were people that, like Wesley Lowery wrote very eloquently on the subject that maybe there should be. Maybe there are things like essential truths that should be written about in absolutes, and that is a window into the more activist way of thinking, that we shouldn't just say this thing happened and this thing happened and this thing happened. We should, and this is kind of, I think, the legacy of it, is these throat-clearing paragraphs of like Donald Trump. To be
sure.
Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, no evidence has been found, blah, 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 right? Like, that is a place that media went, that now I don't know where it's going to go, but I do know that there were some within the community that never liked it, always felt that it was kind of boxing people in, and that even if you are looking to either inform the public or even from the perspective of like, we want to spur action, it kind of hinders it to make everything into a gigantic screaming 5-alarm fire. And I wonder where we're going to go. I think that if anything,
me too.
The one thing that's changed is that, 5 years ago, there were like 3 news directors and a couple of newspaper editors that could really shape.
Yeah, there was still gatekeeping. Absolutely.
Yeah. And now I think it's been on the decline, but we've crossed some kind of Mendoza line where now it's a lot more of a free for all. And that was like, one of the things that when I mentioned before, like the Liz Cheney firing squads and like the Kill Tony guy, I was watching, because I don't like myself, all 4 cable news networks.
The 4 box, of course.
The quad on YouTube TV. And it's like, you would have thought that was the biggest thing in the world. And if you read like the Atlantic and the New York Times, you would have assumed that these were the top stories. Then the election happens and it's like nowhere near anything. It's like it was it basically was somebody's fan fiction that they had spread around just the right people.
Well, it mattered to the people creating the content, but the people creating the content were not the average voter. I mean, that, and it's like, I don't know. It's the other thing too is I think we both benefit from this. Look, when you are the captain of a relatively small ship, like we both are, and you're like, let's turn to port. You just turn.
You just go.
If you are the captain of CNN, you tell the guy who tells the guy who tells the guy who tells the guy to turn the ship, and then they got to fire up the engine, and it takes a really long, I think we can be more, I think this is part of why we're growing, is we can be more nimble. We can be like, okay, what worked and what didn't work, and where do we want to be? And it's kind of it's largely, I think, a governing group of one, or a small group. And you can be like, okay, let's try this. If this doesn't work, we'll try something else. But it's harder for these gigantic media brands, even if they wanted to. I mean, you're seeing this with CNN, the kind of pushing out of Acosta, we're going to be more centrist. I think that's a hard sell. I think, I don't know that that's going to, if you can do it, it's going to take a really long time. And there's going to be some very fallow, lean years in there. And I don't know.
I just don't know. I mean, and this is, I'm totally on the outside because I've never cashed a check inside of TV, but I don't know what the point of a television station that isn't leaning into the benefits of television, of live television, which is kinetic, exciting, anything can happen
Yep.
kind of stuff.
Unpredictable.
Like, look, there was an era where Bernard Shaw could just throw to live footage from Iraq, and that was the craziest thing anyone had ever seen because nobody had that ability before, and nobody had that time frame. We're long past that. Like, now that happens on your phone no matter what. So it's like, what is the benefit of CNN? I don't think a sober reading of the news is that. I do think that you need opinions. You do need to have people there. I've said that, to me, the most no-brainer decision for CNN would be to give Scott Jennings a primetime show.
Of course.
Because
it's going to create.
It would be
look,
totally
Scott Jennings
outside
is
the
the
box.
best thing. Scott Jennings is the best thing that's happened to CNN in years, and the reason why is whether you hate him or you love him, and I like him personally, but a lot of people who are liberals hate him. You still watch him. Like my favorite stat, and it's in Private Parts, the movie about Howard Stern, is that, and I'm misquoting it, but it's like they do a study on Howard Stern's listenership when he was back still on satellite radio or back on terrestrial radio. And it was like people who say they like Howard Stern listen for 20 minutes a day. People who say they hate Howard Stern listen for 65 minutes a day. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it. Yeah.
The best thing that, like, Scott Jennings makes CNN relevant. You can hate him, but you're like, did you see what he just said?
Yeah. And
that's what they need.
It would also be the story in media, in the meta media of like, will it last 6 months? Will it last a year? Are they going to try to keep him on guardrails? Are they forcing certain guests? If he has more than 3 Republicans on the screen at a given time, is that, something that's crazy? I don't know. It would be, I think a bolt of lightning for the network, but also it's like, I don't know where the entire genre goes. Like is CNN a cable network? Is it a tile on HBO Max? Is it a thing that you just lives on your phone? Is it a YouTube channel in 10 years? I have no idea. You could sell me on any of it, and I
totally agree. It will exist in some form and format. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I've said this to you, but I say this to everyone who asks me about media. I always say, look, let me tell you the dirty little secret of legacy media. There is no dirty little secret. Like, they don't know what to do.
Yes.
Like, it's an emperor has no clothes moment. There's no theory of let's get this to how we're going to start building financially again. It's all how can we minimize loss to make money for either the billionaire who owns it or the gigantic, very diversified company who owns it. There's nobody who's like, okay, this is the path. And I always say, a lot of smart people have been thinking about this for a really long time. You know what I mean? It's not as though we're like, wait a minute, mainstream media is not doing so well. We've been thinking about this a really long time, and that's what worries me, is like knowing the people involved, and they are all well-meaning, really smart people, but there's no silver bullet idea. Like, I always say to people, I could see how you or I can make a living doing this because it's us. I don't have any other employees. My wife works with me, but I don't have any other employees.
Yeah.
I make a bunch of content, and I have really low overhead. This is my home, right? Like, and, I had to buy this and a few other things, right? That's it.
By and large, money comes in, it hits the bank account, you're good to go. Yeah.
Whereas I don't think people even grasp, if you haven't worked there or you don't know someone who works there, how big the news gathering operation is at CNN. How many people work in the standards and practices department that you have no idea who they are, but they're sort of the fact checking, the making sure that this piece is ready for air or ready to be published. It's just this vast, expensive enterprise. And I just don't know how, given that, and that I'm not even talking about how much the top anchors make. I'm not even talking about the people you see on TV and they make a bunch of money. I'm talking about people you don't ever see on TV.
Yeah.
Given all of that, I just don't know how it goes, because I just don't think all of a sudden people are going to be like, you know what? You know who needs my donation? You know who needs my subscription? CNN.
CNN.
They might think Justin or Chris.
Yeah.
Like, hey, Chris is like, he's doing his best. But like, yeah, I'll give him. I like him. He seems like a good guy or whatever. But man, it's hard to be like, it's hard for CNN to be like, hey, we're gonna need you to donate. It's just not a particularly appealing donation. It's like, hey, so because you know how much these people on air make, you know what I mean? And it's like,
yeah,
well, Anderson Cooper makes fill in a blank $1 million. Like, why do we need to support that? You guys seem like you're doing fine. It's just hard.
Yeah.
I don't know how you reverse engineer it. I don't know how you go back and say, hey, remember all that stuff we gave you for free? We need you to pay a lot for it now.
Well, I mean, it would be like, hey, you were already paying. You just didn't realize because it was part of your cable package or whatever.
Right.
Like, you know, the thing I've always said, I don't know, I said this a while ago when CNN was in one of its shuffles, that the future for CNN was, because CNN as a brand, I think still really does matter, especially for breaking news.
Absolutely.
Like,
when the plane crashed in D.C., I turned CNN on.
You turn, yeah, exactly. I thought it was like an acquisition for Apple. Have Apple buy it, and now at that point, you don't have to worry. You can strip it down to being like straight ahead. It's essentially what headline news was, but when breaking news happens, you go wire to wire, and now you're pushing it to everybody's phone, everybody's iPhone.
I think that's
a very compelling way to do it. But Apple doesn't. But that's me suggesting
they don't want to be in that business.
Well, no, that Apple who doesn't care about money, because they're like, oh, this could lose $1 billion a year, and we wouldn't be able to find it on the spreadsheet.
Yep, I think that if you told me on January 1st, 2028, that CNN is under new ownership, I would not be surprised in any way, shape, or form. Now, I don't know who buys it, but I don't think Warner Brothers Discovery is the long-term holder of that asset. For the same reason that Comcast spins off MS, NBC, and CNBC. Because they're just... You're talking about this massive company that's not really in the media. I mean, they're in the media space, but kind of like provide, you know, like they want to make as much profit as possible. And it's going to be really hard for these companies to make profit. So it's like, I think they fob it off on someone. And when they do that, that's when I think I really worry about, is it basically just stripped down to your point, stripped down to literally like nameless anchor every hour, just providing like there's no news. It's headline news, right? It's not there's no prime time, there's none of that. I think that's certainly possible.
I mean, I think we're probably close to a big shakeup of CNN. You'd probably know more than I would, but like, you know, I think that there's probably going to be Acosta's gone, but I think that there's probably names higher up that later into the schedule that may or may not be there. Well, forward.
Look, man. I'm going back to the metaphor I used before. The island, even if it's a big island, the island is shrinking.
Yeah,
and it's going to keep shrinking. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be people who are still building houses on the island, but the island is going to continue to shrink, and eventually almost everybody's house is going to fall into the water.
Well, and this has nothing to do with CNN, but more just the history of media, especially television media, is that the names that go first are the bigger ones because they are the bigger paychecks, and you can always slot somebody up and say, all right, well, I'm just using names, who knows, right? But like a Jake Tapper or an Anderson Cooper or a Wolf Blitzer, let's say that they're gone. They're probably at the top of the earning potential there.
Yep.
And you're like, okay, well, what do we really lose if we slot somebody in that has been on the network a bunch into that slot? Really, what is the ratings difference?
I'll give you a much lower financial example, but I'll give you Chris Cillizza, right? Okay. Like when I look back, if I'm a boss at CNN, I really don't think people were like, he's doing a bad job. It's possible, but I don't think they thought I was doing a bad job. But I think they looked at it and they were like, okay, so we're paying him X and he's not an anchor.
Yeah.
Right? He's not, our core business is still linear TV. He's not an anchor. And like, could we get 75% of the page views we get from him for 25% of the money?
Yeah.
And the answer is, candidly, Yes, probably. It's not great for me, but I think that calculation is going to happen a lot. It's one thing that I always tell people is like one lesson I learned, and I should have learned it sooner. No one's replaceable. No matter how great and distinctive you think you are, everyone's replaceable. And just keep that in your, particularly in the next 10 years of media, keep that in your brain. Do not think that you are, you know what it made me think of? It's so funny. I was thinking this yesterday, just because I'm selfish and I try to make everything come back to me. If you told me 10 days ago, if you said, name the 3 least tradable players in the NBA, I would have been like, Wembanyama.
Yep.
And honestly, Luka Doncic would probably have been second. And the point is like, Giannis, that there's no sacred cows anymore across any of this stuff. If you tell me anyone could be moved at any point, I wouldn't be stunned, because I look at Luka Doncic and I'm like, he's 25 years old. He's like one of the 3 best scorers in the world, and he's going to continue to be good. Dallas looks at him, they're like, well, he's kind of fat and he doesn't, like, he's not in shape. And we probably won't be able to sign him for a $345 million Supermax deal. So let's get rid. Like, the point is like, no matter what you think you are, even if you demonstrably are that thing, no one would dispute that Luka Doncic is amazing at basketball. There's going to be people who are like, like no one can't be moved.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really like important lesson, because I think we all convince ourselves. I always say, you're always the hero of your own story, right? You're always the one working the hardest, providing the most value, underpaid, underappreciated. It's like, yeah, but everyone thinks that that's them.
Yeah.
So it's like, just be aware of kind of, and I wasn't, candidly, I wasn't. I thought I was great.
Pivot a little bit. What a terrible 6 months for Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban goes all in on Kamala, big surrogate, sticks his foot in his mouth when he's on the trail, does the whole like smart women don't like Donald Trump, brings Megyn Kelly on stage. Kamala loses, and then the team that he made his entire personality, the Dallas Mavericks, that he cares so much about, he sold it to the Adelsons.
Miriam Adelson.
Yeah, which is hilarious because
it always gets back to politics.
I know. But then they sell the guy who he said he would divorce his wife before he traded Luka Doncic, and they get AD and one of the Lakers' first round picks, and they don't even shop him. Just ridiculous.
It's there. One thing I've learned is never. Who told me? Oh, Jamie Raskin, of all people. So I'm doing this show.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I'm doing this show in D.C. on Monumental Sports Network, which is the regional sports network here.
Yeah.
And I talk to politicians about like sports they played and stuff, and like how that informed their life. And I was with Raskin, who lives, in Montgomery County, very close in Maryland, just across the D.C. line. And we were hiking in Rock Creek Park, and he was telling me about Lauren Boebert. Okay. Mm-hmm. Who you would not think Jamie Raskin and Lauren Boebert have a lot in common, right? They're clearly ideologically polar opposites.
Very different.
And he was telling me how they're friendly, and they don't talk about politics, but that they're friendly. And he said something to me, and it's sort of cliche, but I think about it all the time. He's like, I'm never done with anyone. I don't think that anyone's story just stops.
Yeah.
And like, I think I think of that all the time. It's like, we're so quick to judge people, end their stories, close the book. And the truth of the matter is, it's like, man, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth acts. I mean, look at who's in the White House right now. If you need a reminder that history is long. And, I think we're so dismissive, like in the moment, of people, and it's like, man, people have other acts so I keep trying to like use my own life as a way to say, like, look, I didn't want this to happen, it happened, and here's like what I've done with it since then.
Well, I'll tell you what, that is a great way for us to go out on. Chris Cillizza, the So What Substack, everybody head on over there. Thank you so much, man. Great talking to you as always.
Thank you. Can I say one other quick thing? One really
Please,
great thing about Substack for me is getting to interact with folks like you who I didn't know before. You know, like, yes, there are a lot of people on Substack who I knew in the media world, but there are also a lot of people I didn't. And that's one reason I like Substack and why I'm like an evangelist for it is I'm like,
oh, big time.
It's really collaborative in that way. And you get to like, you know, like talk to people and be exposed to their audience in ways that like I wouldn't do otherwise. It's like, we're all kind of on the same team. It's not like CNN. It's not like if you get one subscriber, that's one less subscriber for me.
No,
you know what I mean?
No,
like
in fact,
I really think
opposite.
it is like a collaborative
more
rising
likely,
tide.
Yeah.
Yes. Like and to me in journalism, it's always so cutthroat. It's like, well, if they get this scoop, I didn't get it. Well, if they're the anchor, I'm not. And it's like that zero-sum game stuff really took a toll on my mental health, and I'm really glad not to be playing it anymore. So I'm just thankful for you and for the sort of platform.
This is always very much reminds me of the aughts blog revolution, that there was a lot of people, there's a lot of young talent that was just writing for the sake of writing and writing for the sake of the fact that there was like this really exciting audience that was popping up, but it didn't have the artificial lines. Like you mentioned, it's like, what's the most exciting thing that could happen in like, you know, cable news? Like let's go back a few years when you had like big stars, right? Let's like Bill O'Reilly going on Rachel Maddow's show,
totally,
or Keith Olbermann's show would have been the biggest thing that could happen, but it would never happen for a million different financial reasons. That's the case. But here on the internet, we don't have the lines. We're like,
and I think that's much more how regular people think too. Like I don't know that they see the world the way that the media world sees it. And I think that it's healthy to give them like content the way they want it, as opposed to content the way we think or we say they should want it.
The way it's supposed to be done.
Right.
With all the throat clearing.
Yep.
Well, Chris, again, thank you so much for coming on. Everybody go check that out.
Thank you for asking. All right, man.
All right, Doug. Peace out.
Take care. All right, dude.
And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics, written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio in Austin, Texas. If you'd like to email me, it is theyoungamerican@gmail.com. Find, follow, and share video clips of your boy, Justin R. Young, on TikTok, Justin R. Young on Instagram, Justin R. Young on X, our YouTube. We're full video of this show exists. Politics is the account on the YouTube. Of course, you can support us with a one-time payment. PayPal.me/PayJury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3Cash, and you can hit me with anything you like in the mail. Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. Of course, you can always get our bonus content at TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Paying members get 2 bonus episodes each and every week, either $3 a week, that's $12 a month, or $99 for the entire year. It's 150 episodes of the show for under $100, but it is only our founding tier that gets your name read at the end of the podcast, like these fine folks: L3PO, Peepaw, Scott, Middle-Aged Mike, Tom, Sarah Jeannie, Jeremy, Pro Idiot, Chiller Tomatoes, oh yeah, it's Adam, Neil, AB Puppy, Just Another Pilot, Dr. Whiskey, Michael, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Will, The Borge B, Matthew, Matt, Andrew, Edwin, Sam, Andrew, Phil, Edison, Devon, Paul, A Dog Named Truckers, Gloria, my mom, Jerry, Trucker, John, Berkeley, Stephen, and Zombie Doc. You want your name read on that show? One place to do it. Take politics seriously. .com. We got some interesting stuff here coming for you. On Friday's edition of the show, the great Carol Markowitz makes her return because she has had a political awakening. She was a New York refugee to Florida. She is one of the DeSantis COVID refugees. She very much loves her adopted state, and yet is getting a first-hand look at what I have always known to be the Florida legislature, which is entirely captured by corporate interests. We will talk about that. I think we're going to have Jen Briney, probably going to have Jen Briney on to wrap up our hearing aids segment. But that wraps it up for us today. Till next time. This is your old pal Justin Robert Young saying, some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, still more discuss politics. But this is the only show that dares discuss. All three.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show audio.